Sérgio Mendes, thank you first of all for having us here at your home. Thank you very much. We're very honored. And yeah, my first question would be that I mean, you've been constantly in the charts with the taste of, or with mixes, different variations of Brazilian and US American blends of music, like Bom Tempo, like your new album. Can you tell us what kind of mix, what idea are you focusing on?
The idea in Bom Tempo, by the way, means good weather. It means a good time, good tempo as well, you know, in the drums. So it's a very nice sounding word in Portuguese, Bom Tempo, and everybody in the world can pronounce too, which I like it. So it's about the classics of Brazilian music, revisited, like, you know, like what I did with Mais Que Nada. And this time I have Brazilian guests. It's all Brazilian guests. And so I have Milton Nascimento, I have Seu Jorge, which is an upcoming fantastic singer. I have Carlinhos Brown, which worked with me in the past, also great. So, and my wife, Gracinha. So it's really very Brazilian dance oriented. Of course, you're gonna, you know, I mean, I grew up with jazz, so you're gonna hear some jazz in there, you're gonna hear, you know, but it's basically, there's a couple of raps. Actually, one of the raps done by a group from Angola. They were here in Los Angeles, and when I was doing this tune, which is called Maracatu Atômico, and maracatu is a rhythm from Brazil, from the northern part, and it came from Angola. And coincidentally, the kids were here in LA, and they have a rhythm in Angola called kuduro, which is kind of, we did a maracatu, but that's where the maracatu came from. So it was a great coincidence to have them do a little rap in Angolan Portuguese. So this album is very Brazilian, but it's also international. It's dance, it's, you know, but the repertoire is some of the classic Brazilian songs like País Tropical, Maracatu Atômico was recorded before also, and there's a couple of 3 new songs, but there's like a reinterpretation of a lot of Brazilian classics.
Is maracatu, is this also like a stick dance?
No. Maracatu, yeah, they play with sticks, yeah, a lot of drums, and it's typical of Pernambuco, Recife, the northern part of Brazil, and that's where maracatu came from. Also in this album I have a horn section, which is very interesting. I haven't used a horn in many years. So it's kind of Earth, Wind and Fire meets Sérgio Mendes kind of thing, you know. It's great horn arrangements, and you know, great musicians played on it and singers. So Bom Tempo, I'm very happy. It's coming out in about a month.
Maybe question, Bom Tempo, how fast is the tempo? Is it also a reduced, a relaxed tempo, or is it?
No, different tempos. You know, you have the record in your car. I mean, it's different tempos. What we did is this CD, and together another CD of remixes by famous DJs of those songs. Then they get, you know, dance time. So we have Paul Oakenfold, we have a couple of kids from London called Moto Blanco, we have a very hot DJ called DJ Chucky, we have a couple of girls from Australia named Nervo. So that's their interpretation of this record. So I'm very happy because that opens another door for the dance, you know, the dance crowd.
Okay. Sérgio Mendes, before this album, I mean, 2 albums before, you had a huge success with the Mais Que Nada.
Yes.
And in a way, I was thinking also like in '66 when the song first came out, like 40 years ago, it always a huge, big success.
Right.
By that time, I think it was really the one of the first times that Brazilian music went into pop. Can you describe maybe the times and how you made it to get this song like a worldwide acceptance for Brazilian music, not to be seen as world music but as pop?
Yeah, well, it's such a strong melody, chant. And so in 1966 I had the band in Brazil 66, and the melody is so infectious, it's so great. It's happy, it's up-tempo, and people love that melody. And it's the first time that a record in Portuguese entered the charts all over the world. And so I decided to record again 40 years later. When I did the record was Will I Am, Timeless. That's the first song. We said, let's redo it. Let's see if we can bring it fast forward to 2006 and make Mais Que Nada today. And again, it was a big success. I think the melody is the key. You know, you can put rhythms, you can do this and that, but if you don't have a great song, I think for me, starts with a song, it ends with a song. It's like a great movie. If you don't have a good story, you don't have a good movie.
And the story is not the beat, the story is the melody?
The story is the melody, yeah. Of course, the story, what stays in your mind is the melody. When you say, bow, 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 so, oh, I know this song. So that's the melody. Now, if you ask people what's the rhythm, they won't tell you. Probably the average person cannot tell you. Well, yeah, you're a musician. But the average person remembers the melody. And that's why I think it's so important. It's very simple melody also.
But on the other side, the rhythm is underneath is important as well. And
absolutely.
Let's say, like during this time when you also like the song performed in the US, and also I think in 1962 you played at the Bossa Nova Festival in New York, or you were among the first people really getting there, bringing it across, and also mixing with the US American jazz scene. Can you maybe tell us how important the rhythms, because they were full of melody, but I think you had different rhythmic repertoire, how that affected the US American jazz scene?
Well, you know, we're talking about 1962, was a Bossa Nova concert at Carnegie Hall. And that was the time when Desafinado, Girl from Ipanema, I mean, the meeting of Stan Getz with Gilberto and Jobim's song, that made it so magical. That moment, you know, that was the Bossa Nova days. And there was an instrumental group, called the Bossa Rio, 2 trombones and a tenor saxophone, drums, bass, and I had no vocals in those days. And it was a great band. We traveled all over the world with that band, so I had a lot of good memories. And then we went to Berlin to see Cannonball, and he invited me to make an album with him. I said, wow, you know, it's a great thing. And of course, it was, you know, jazz and Brazilian music, because it's like, it comes from Africa. I mean, that's the common denominator. I mean, Africa came to Brazil and brought the samba. They came to Cuba and brought, you know, the Cuban rhythms. They came to America, they brought jazz. So the common denominator is Africa. That's what brings us together in Brazilian music and hip hop and Cuban music, Caribbean music, reggae. This is all Africa.
Was it maybe like also something that like US American musicians, they just had the drum set and they put many of African rhythmic elements, they transform it to the bass, sometimes to the guitar. Did they discover something in your music that that was a little apart from them? I
think so. I think you know, most of the jazz, it's very much straight ahead. You know, it's kind of, if I can say that, I mean, but it's kind of a, you know, straight ahead thing. The Brazilian rhythms are such a variety of rhythms. You hear maracatu, you hear samba, you hear baião, you hear forró, you know, it's all different. And I think that's very inspiring to musicians all over the world. And in those days, I think the attraction was the melodies, the beautiful melodies that Antonio Carlos Jobim wrote. I mean, amazing. I'm sure when Stan Getz heard Girl from Ipanema or Desafinado, you know, he was like in love with that, you know. And that brought him from being just a jazz musician to the charts. He became a top 10 jazz musician in the pop charts. And I think the combination was very good. He was a great player. But most of all, the important part was the beautiful melodies of Antonio Carlos Jobim. And that's what stays until today. On Album Bom Tempo, I again do a song from Jobim. He was a friend of mine. And so again, in the melody, you know.
Maybe but Jobim and also you, like in the late 50s when you developed the Bossa Nova, was it, I read in an interview that you said the Bossa Nova is maybe more like a reaction to bebop. Is it, or no. Falsely, is it not a reaction also to like cool jazz attitude?
Not at all. Bossa Nova was something original, made in Rio de Janeiro, was a style, was like a brunch like a tree, a branch of the samba tree. Like you have maracatu, you have baião, and then you had the bossa nova period, early 60s, late 50s, the 60s, Rio de Janeiro, Ipanema, Copacabana, Antonio Carlos Jobim. That was it. It's nothing to do with jazz. I mean, in those days I was listening to. I started listening to Horace Silver, Bud Powell. I mean, that's what's like. But then when I heard those melodies, you know, and started playing, of course, my band, Bossa Rio, had a lot of, because I love bebop, so it had that bebop influence. So we were playing Brazilian songs, was kind of a samba jazz, kind of, if you can put a label. You know, I never put a label in it. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's what it feels natural for me.
Okay.
Yeah. There's another, a couple of songs on the Bom Tempo. They were written by my music teacher back in Brazil, a black man from the northern named Moacir Santos, and he's from the Bossa Nova days. And he's not as well known as some of the other composers, but he was amazing, and he taught me harmony and piano, and great arranger, and I decided to revisit his songs. So there's two songs in there. One was Seu Jorge and my wife. It's called Maracatu, Nation of Love. And there's another one called Orpheus. So I should talk about Moacir because I learned a lot from him. And he was a very special person in Brazil, very special composer. He came to live in Los Angeles. He died here. So he stayed the later part of his life in here. Was a dear friend of mine. So check out those songs.
We will, right in the car. As soon as we
do a tour in Brazil. I was playing at this nightclub.
I would ask you about your tour in France.
I'm sorry? Okay.
He was a good jazz guitar player. Right?
Fantastic jazz guitar player. We can talk about that.
But how did it match like the bossa nova, also like the suave, like the chilling approach of it, with also the jazz going on in the US at that time? Like Stan Getz, was he affected also by
that? Of course. I mean, bossa nova started in Brazil before Stan Getz. It was the music of Antonio Carlos Jobim, and João Gilberto was the singer that really started singing a totally different way, very soft with his guitar, and there was drums and bass. But this is before Getz. And what happened was Charlie Bird went down to South America for a tour for the United States, I think, Department of Culture or something like that. And so he ended up in Rio and started listening to that music. So he came back and recorded Desafinado, instrumental, which became a big hit. And then he told Stan Getz about Bossa Nova, which was really a wonderful moment, a wonderful period of Brazilian music. You know, very minimalist, very, very cool, and you know. But again, you know, the melodies. You know, when you hear Corcovado or any of those fantastic, those are timeless songs, and that's what I think it made it, was like, because it was not like a 1 or 2 or 3 hits. You know, Jobim must have written maybe 600 songs. And then after Bossa Nova, you have other times of Brazilian music. You have Tropicalia, which is Gilberto Gil, Caetano. So you have a lot of composers that came, great composers after that, Milton Nascimento. And so Brazilian music continues to change and to present interesting things and rhythms. And I think that's the beauty of Brazilian music.
You just told me that you went to Birdland, Cannonball Alley,
Yes.
was there, and it was also the time of the hard bop, or people like US American musicians discovering African music, and Art Blakey,
Right.
Jazz Messengers. They were deeply into Afro and Brazilian grooves. How did you?
Yeah, because
experience-
I think you know, a lot of North American musicians, because I'm also American, South. They fell in love with the different rhythms and songs. And I mean, I remember when Dizzy Gillespie went to Cuba, he came back and, you know, he started the whole Cuban jazz thing, which was wonderful. So the Brazilian thing came a little later, like I told you, and was the same thing, the attraction for something very different, very melodical, very nice. So in that way, I think, you know, those songs influenced everybody. Stevie Wonder, for instance, he told me how much he liked that kind of music. Will.i.am came here to this house, and He brought all my old records. He was in love. He knows every bossa nova song, not only bossa nova, Brazilian song. Because, you know, sometimes people have a tendency of relating to Brazilian song just as bossa nova. Bossa nova was a time, like bebop was a time. But it's such a great sounding word. Everybody can pronounce bossa nova. So I go to Japan, they ask me, oh, bossa nova. I say, hey, great bossa nova. There's a lot of other things, you know, besides bossa nova. So I hope I can make that clear. It was a wonderful moment. And maybe the best songwriting in Brazil was written around that time.
Maybe one question, you just talked about your teacher from Northern Brazil, who's
Yes.
also on the Bon Tempo. I read that you also have like a classical approach. When you started, what attracted you first to jazz music? Was it the Brazilian tradition, or did you listen to jazz music from the United States?
I mean, I grew up listening to samba music, you know, from the slums, from the favelas, carnival music, and all those rhythms, you know, that you still hear today, and it's like around the house. You heard, you know, from open the window, you will hear the tak-chika, that thing. So you grow up with that. I started learning classical piano when I was 7. I took piano lessons, and you know, I played Mozart and Ravel, Debussy, Chopin, all of that. And when I was about 13 years old, a friend of mine showed me a jazz record. It was a Dave Brubeck record, and I said, wow, I never heard that. And I said, well, that's wonderful. What's that? You know, so oh, this is jazz, American jazz. In those days, it was very hard to get those imported American records. Then I started listening to, you know, other pianists like Horace Silver, Bud Powell, and you know, Charlie Parker. And I said, wow, this is. So we start forming a little bands in my hometown, and like trios and quartets. So we try to take the arrangements out of the record by ear, trying to copy those chords and so that was my world. At that same time, Bossa Nova is starting, and Jobim and Moacir and beautiful melodies. So that was a wonderful time. And then I came to the States in 1962, as I told you, for the Bossa Nova concert. And then Canon Boy, I was there, Dizzy, you know, everybody. And it was just an amazing thing for me to be in New York as a young kid and to be playing with those guys. And so that's very important.
By that time, you just said 1962. Was all the time I told you before. You don't have to answer if there's nothing to your head. But it was also the times of the civil rights movement in the U.S. and people like Dizzy Gillespie. They couldn't even. I mean, there were. It was a segregated country. How did you experience that?
I didn't, because I knew because of the television. I went back to Brazil and I didn't come here until '64. But I saw all of that on television, like the rest of the world. And when I came here, 64, 65, was the time of the Vietnam War. And it was a lot of protests, a lot of people in the streets, you know. And that was an amazing time, you know. And, you know, you had Carlos Santana, you had, you know, Woodstock, you had all of that tremendous movement towards. So that was very good. I mean, you know, that moment, historical moment, was so important, I think, for the history of the United States and the world, you know, Martin Luther King and so forth. Yeah.
Another jazz form that evolved at that time is like free jazz, like people like Ornette Coleman or like John Coltrane. Do you like free jazz when you listen to that?
Well, Coltrane I love Coltrane, yeah. I mean, it's really amazing, yeah. I mean, people put labels and things, you know, which is okay, I mean, you know, but I rather refer to periods like, you know, the bebop period. You have so many different musicians, and then you have Coltrane, which is amazing, and Miles. I mean, Miles was always ahead of his time. You know, not only his sound, but the way, and he loved Brazilian music. He made an album called Quiet Nights, playing Brazilian songs, so he loved that. So, you know, Brazilian music has influenced a lot of musicians all over the world, and I think it's because of it's very spontaneous, it's romantic, has a lot of sensuality, and you can dance to it. So it has all those. It's sunny, you know, has all those great components, and harmonically beautiful and melodically beautiful. So that continues to. I think even, you know, in our days, you hear a lot of, you know, a lot of music, Brazilian music played all over the world. I'm going to Japan next week, and they love Brazilian music. I mean, I've been going to Japan almost every year.
They say bossa, bossa.
Yeah.
Do they also like the more like the traditional Brazilian styles, or are they more connected to bossa? Interesting.
No, you know, the Japanese, they're very, you know, they are traditionalists, but they also open-minded too. My album Timeless did very, very well there. We got, I mean, yeah.
But this did very well all over the world.
So,
I mean,
yeah, but
like
you know, so they do like, if you know, they're Japanese rappers, they're Japanese hip-hop, there's traditional Japanese music. So they're very interested in the rest of the world and kind of open-minded. But they do, of course, they like that period of Brazilian music, the minimalist small guitar thing, which I like too.
Sure, you made it. Maybe let's talk about France. You said that you played with Sacha Distel, and that you toured also France, like in the early '60s, I think. How did you experience France at that time? Because I mean, many jazz musicians from the US, but also Brazilians, are attracted to France.
Well, Sacha Distel, I was playing in a club in Brazil. I think it was 1963. There was a club in Copacabana called the Bottles Bar. That's where all the musicians used to hang, and you know, and foreign musicians would come to Brazil. They would go there to listen to the music, jam sessions, and people, you know, bossa nova guys, and it was a wonderful place. And I was working there. It was a trio. So he came from France to do a tour in Brazil, and he came to the Bottles Bar. So we jammed together, you know, and we hang for about a week. He was in Rio, and a great player. And so I remember that. As far as me going to France, the first time I went was 1968. And Brazil 66 was a big success in Europe as well. And we played at Théâtre des Champs-Élysées, which is a beautiful old theater. And I mean, I fell in love with France, with Paris. I mean, it's like, wow, you know. I mean, I think any artist will fall in love with that city. It's just so magical and so beautiful. And I love it. I mean, almost every year we go to France. We have friends in Bordeaux, we have friends in Paris, and so forth. I like very much going there.
And the French loved you as well, eh?
Well, I hope so.
Yes, I know. Also one of your hits also with Brazil 66 was The Fool on the Hill, a Beatles cover.
Yeah, that's right.
And what was special about this song, and in general about the composition of Lennon McCartney? Why did you choose this song?
Yeah, you know, I was on vacation in Acapulco, and a friend of mine took the Magical Mystery Tour album, and I heard that melody. I said, wow, that's really beautiful melody. So when I came back, I had a drummer named Don Romão. I said, can we play a samba in three, you know? And I said, samba in three, yeah, why not? So we started rehearsing, and it just felt perfect, you know? And the melody was there, and the lyrics. So I think it was the first time I played a samba in three, you know, because samba is 4, you know, or 2. But so that made it very different. It made it very Brazilian. And again, the key was the beautiful melody, very unusual and beautiful, you know.
Like, you're very picky on melodies. I mean,
yeah.
As you said, like Jobim, if you grew up, I like with the musicians like him at his side, again, like the Beatles. What did they have something special to them other than other bands from this era?
Yeah, melodies, one after another. I recorded Fool on the Hill. I did Day Tripper. With a little help from my friends. I recorded a lot of, because that was when I came here in 1960, came to LA actually. And when I started Brazil 66 so that was the music on the radio. And I said, you know, why not, if I play Jobim, I can play Cole Porter, I can play, you know, it doesn't matter if somebody writes a great melody, if I can make it different, if I can give my own interpretation. And that's what I think we did with those Beatles songs. And then later on, I did record Cole Porter and Gershwin and Burt Bacharach, and because again, they are like tremendous songwriters.
you already said also Stevie Wonder, the real thing, a song that you made, and I heard that he was by chance he was in the other studio and he just walked over and said, Sergio, I got to play. I want to be on this record.
No, this was on Timeless. No, Stevie I met here in LA. I had a singer named Marietta Waters, and her boyfriend was Michael Cimbello, which worked with Stevie. So Mike and I became very friends. One day he took me to see the band. They had a band called Wonder Love, and Michael was the guitar player. So I met Stevie, and we started talking about Brazilian music, and he said how much he loved Brazilian music and songs. I said, well, and then he said, I'm going to write a song for you. I said, wow, you know. And then, no, before that, he asked me, can I write some Portuguese lyrics for him? And I did, first time and last time I wrote Portuguese lyrics. A song of his that he recorded on the, I think, Inner Visions, album, I'm not sure. Anyway, I wrote, and he sang in Portuguese. And then he called me later, he said, listen, I have a song for you. Let's go to the studio. So he started playing The Real Thing, which I loved, you know, a beautiful song. And he played clavinet, I played piano, and Mike Cimbello played guitar, and his bass player that's also on this record, Nathan Watts, played bass, and then after that, you know, became good friends, and all the time he's genius, you know, he's again, another incredible songwriter, not only singer and keyboard player, but tremendous songwriter. Stevie's melodies are universal, so he's one of my favorite songwriters, actually.
How did you like the Mozart?
No, the story may interrupt you. So you fast forward years later. I'm recording with Will here in LA, and I was doing a Baden Powell song, a Berimbau Consolação, and Stevie was next door, which I didn't know. So he comes in and listens. Hey, so he said, "Can I bring my harmonica tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." Will went like, "Oh yes." He brought the harmonica next day, one take. It was beautiful. You know, it was like one of those incredible things, you know. Again, a harmonica player, total genius.
Did you like the Motown sound, or the whole time when Stevie brought up? How do you like his coming up in the music scene? How did you witness that?
Well, I remember listening to those, you know, early Motowns, the Temptations, and you know, all those records. And Stevie was, of course, I mean, like my favorite. And then the Jacksons, and then, you know, was a wonderful time here. That whole Motown sound was so special, you know. They had the signature, they had a style.
Can you describe the style? And you as a producer, what was it about it? Was it the melody again?
Well, you know, I was not, I mean, first of all, I was not in Detroit. I mean, I was not recording for Motown. I was just appreciating some of the songs and some of the style. But, you know, I was always doing kind of a, you know, jazz, yes, Brazilian music, of course, Brazilian rhythms. So the Motown thing was a separate entity. And of course, you know, it's a wonderful thing, but it was very, they had their own style, their own thing that was very beautiful.
Like Bert Bacharach, you recorded also, or many of
Yes.
very popular tunes. Do you like the label Easy Listening? It's again something that categorizes?
Yeah, that's right. It's another label, you know, that categorize music. And I think it's, I mean, people have a tendency to do that, you know, easy listening, lounge, whatever, progressive, you know, I don't know. Call it samba hop, you know. Yeah.
All right. Maybe almost one question concerning jazz. So it was interested me. Did you ever listen like Lenny Tristano? Was he important or relevant to you?
Yeah, when I was still in Brazil, yeah, Lenny Tristano, fantastic pianist. Yeah, of course I heard him. But the most amazing pianist ever for me was Art Tatum. It's just like, it's just so amazing when you hear Art Tatum. And years later, I met here in LA, Joe Zawinul. We're very close friends, and from Austria. And he started telling me how much he loved Art Tatum as well. So it's something that pianists, it's a master, you know.
Okay. Um, I mean, like looking back to the days like with Brazil '66, would you say there's something that you miss from today, or what was special about around this time? What is not here around anymore?
Well, you know, I mean, I love that time, but I'm having a good time now, Bom Tempo. So I don't miss it. I'm looking for tomorrow and enjoying today.
Okay, this is good. And maybe last question of all would be, do you have like 5 songs? Like all the people we ask to talk about, do you have 5 albums or 5 things you would recommend, your own or other people's works? Songs or albums? It's free, up to you.
Well, songs. Of course, I would have to say a few Jobim songs that, like Surfboard, that I recorded on Timeless. The song I just recorded on Bom Tempo called Caminhos Cruzados. My wife sings, beautiful song. Milton Nascimento, Travessia. Gilberto Gil, many Gilberto Gil songs that one of my favorite composers. Trying to remember a particular song. And then I would say songs like Night and Day, songs like You're the Sunshine of My Life, you know. So there you have Jobim, Stevie, Gilberto Gil, Milton Nascimento, and Moacir Santos, my teacher. So I would say, yeah, Orpheus, beautiful song, and Maracatu, Nation of Love. So those are my 5 songs, my favorite songs. You know, then there are albums that I love, like Miles' Quiet Nights, I love that. Jobim and Sinatra, beautiful, you know.
He was there in '62 also. Was it on the concert? Was he among the...
I toured with Sinatra in 1969. I met him and he invited me to go and tour. It was in the United States. And we did all, you know, I was opening act for him. I was playing, and then it was Buddy Rich band and him, of course. And then he invited me again in 1980 to go around the world. So we went to London, we went to France. He was a good friend and my favorite singer of all times. Again, another genius, you know. Melody man, yes.
Yeah, maybe one last question is like for my personal interest, not to remember the film, like with will.i.am. How did it, like for you, that when he showed up here? I mean, I was reading about it,
Yeah.
and I think he's a very big genius as well. Like,
Amazing. Yeah.
how was that? Can you tell us a little bit about this coming together of both of you?
Again, it was very natural because he wanted to meet me, so I said, come over. I kind of didn't know because the Black Eyed Peas were starting. So my children, I have a 23-year-old, and I said, Dad, it's the Black Eyed Peas, they're hot, blah, blah, blah. So he came in, and it was a bunch of records, my old vinyl stuff, you know, Full on the Hill and all those songs, and Mais Que Nada and Brazil '66, and instrumental albums I did for Atlantic before that. And so he came in, we started talking, and he told me that he grew up here in LA, and that was his favorite music. And I said, wow. You know, I was surprised that he liked that music, being a hip-hop artist. And he said, no, he told me, he said, not only myself, but some of my friends also, you know, like India Ari or John Legend, you know, they all love Brazilian music. But Will knew those songs, like, you know, bar by bar. He knew very well the melodies and everything else. And so he invited me to play on his album Elefunk. And it was a Brazilian song, again a Jobim song, How Insensitive, Insensatez. And I did a piano solo, but I love the vibe, you know, working with him and something different. And I haven't recorded in 10 years. I was not, I kind of said, you know, I'm gonna lay back a little bit. And so I came home, I told my wife, I said, I think I'm gonna record again. So I called him next day, said, yeah, I would love to do it, let's do it. So that's what that album was. And then, you know, he brought his friends into it, you know, John Legend, India Ari, Q-Tip, and Justin Timberlake. I brought in Marcelo D2 from Brazil, So it was really a nice hip hop meets samba kind of thing, you know, but was not forced, you know, it was something very natural. It just felt right because, again, it's urban music, it's street music, like we have carnival in Brazil. It's street music, and it's African music again. That's where it comes from. So that's why it's so natural to mix Brazil with Mozambique or Angola or jazz or hip hop, or, you know, it's a very natural thing. And like jazz was the same thing, you know. That's why you know, Stan Getz and Jobim, and then Sinatra and Jobim, and all the great singers, you know, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, everybody sang Brazilian songs, and now you have Diana Krall. She just did an album, you know, called Quiet Nights, singing Brazilian songs. So it kind of keeps, it's so powerful, that kind of music.
Just comes to my head. Till Brunner, who also played with you.
Till Brunner, yes.
He did Brazilian
yes.
album.
That's right. Yes. Somebody sent me some albums from a German artist, and I heard his trumpet flugelhorn and said, "Wow, beautiful tone." So I called him, and of course, you know, he did a beautiful solo, and then after that he went to Brazil to make an album. He great artist, great trumpet player, wonderful person, you know, it's a great guy.
He was in one of our shows, like 1.5 years ago. We did like a live show. He was there, and he played a French tune from French trumpet player Boris Vian. This was about.
No, I don't know.
This he played.
I play?
No, he played.
Oh, he
Till
played.
Brunner.
Till Brunner. Yes, great.
Was it like you just said, like with Will.i.am? Was it kind of like history repeating in a way, just 40 years later? And
it's kind of, isn't it? I mean, this was the opposite. It was Cannonball. I was the young guy meeting the older guy. Now Will was the young guy meeting the older guy. So it's kind of the generation thing, and music bringing us together as the universal languages. That, I think, is the beautiful part of it. You know. Then you have Stevie. You have you know, it's all that wonderful atmosphere, fantastic music and sounds, and in a very natural way.